All right, all right, all right. And we are live. Hopefully everybody is doing good today. We're just going to wait for everybody to sort of file on in. I set this live stream up a little bit last minute. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it at this time today, but I was able to do it at this time today. So sorry if you guys did not get the notification, the heads up before this started, but we are here, we are live, and we are doing it. I'm just retweeting my live stream on Twitter real fast, and bang, bang, boom. We are good to go. Hopefully everybody's doing good. We have a good amount of updates to cover, not a lot of huge events going on. We have some news coming out of the Middle East that we're going to talk about. But yeah, it's been a little bit slow, which is okay. I've been enjoying a little bit of an information break. I think it's about to get pretty chaotic, so it's been a nice little reprieve before things go crazy. Yeah, so we got some stuff to talk about. Let's see, we got some people in here now talking about where they're from. We got people from Berlin, Jamaica. Greetings from Russia. Greetings. I'm so glad you guys could be here with me today. Manchester, UK, US colony, Sweden. Greetings from California, Netherlands. Awesome. Rome, Italy, Cyprus, Florida, Poland, Portugal. Dang, that's crazy. Slovakia, Virginia, Sicily. Awesome, guys. Good news is the internet is all over the world, so wherever you guys are watching me from, whatever time of day it is, whether it's your evening, whether it's your morning, whether it's your midday, or whether it's your night, I appreciate you guys so much for being in here today with me, learning some stuff about Ukraine. I'm also going to learn some stuff about Ukraine today. If you guys want to support my work or find more of my work, you can go to the link in the YouTube description where you can find my Telegram, my Twitter, and most importantly, my Patreon. On my Patreon, you can find my demonetized series. It is just going up. I appreciate you guys so much over there. Go join as a free member and get access to the entire 16 episodes of Demonetized over there. I just go over combat footage and stuff like that. So if you're interested, you can go over there, join for free. You get access to all the content. And then if you wish to support me, you can do that as well. I really appreciate you guys so much. You are killing it over there, and you guys are killing it on YouTube as well. My live streams have been growing every single time, which is awesome. That's what we want. I'm hoping that the chat is getting better and everything for you guys. I really appreciate it. Remember, if you have questions that you want asked during or answered during the live stream, the way to ensure getting that done is by going through super chats so that I can see them pop up. You are more than welcome to ask your question, but I don't see all the questions as the chat moves. All right. Okay. Let's go ahead and get into the map updates, everybody. As you guys can see, the title of today's episode is Kursk in Reverse. I've been actually wanting to make a Kursk episode for quite some time, but we've had a lot of other very important events pop up that were better titles and thumbnails for my YouTube videos. But today we're going to be hyper-focused on the Kursk offensive. Let's see. What is stopping Putin from taking Zelensky out? The fact that if you take out somebody who is making mistakes and is not doing what they should be doing, you could replace them with somebody dangerous, somebody ruthless. You could just make the situation much worse for yourself. The idiot is much easier to deal with than the idiot or the genius that you could replace him with. Right. So this happened in the second. This is one of the causes of the second Chechen war was the assassination of a leader, which just led to more issues than it actually solved. So you can look at Israel. Israel has been assassinating Hezbollah, Hamas leaders, Iranian IRGC guys, and it doesn't change anything because they just get replaced with somebody else who's not going to make the same mistakes. Really, it doesn't help anything. So. That's my take on it. I don't think that killing Zelensky does anything for the Russians at this time. All right, to the map. Okay, so we have actually just a large number of updates across the entire front line here. So we will get into it. But there's not particularly an area right now where the Russians are advancing tremendously quick, right? We saw a bunch of progress in the Pokrovsk region. And when I say, hold on, rewind. When I say tremendously quick, I mean faster than at any point in the war. Because right now what we're seeing is incredibly fast Russian gains compared to this time last year. The Russians weren't doing anything like this. Even this time 6 months ago is in a completely accelerated pace of Russian advance. So if we're going to zoom in here, remember that Ugledar is now effectively in a tactical encirclement. Ugledar's days are numbered now. It's not if, it's when. With the collapse of these mines, the situation is getting much, much worse for the residents of Ugledar. And when I say residents, I mean the AFU who are currently stationed in this small town. It is a bastion. It is the linchpin of defense along this southern line. Once this falls, the next line is basically this next road, potentially this string of settlements. But undoing this right here is going to do so much damage to this southern front for the Ukrainians, and it's going to open up a bunch of opportunities for the Russians. Most importantly, with the securing of the 0532, which runs directly through Ugledar, the Russians will capture a new supply line directly out of Marinka, which is out of Donetsk. Instead of coming back here, coming down, and working your way all the way around. Now for this front line, the Russians will be able to run supplies up and down this road, greatly enhancing the logistics capability of the Russians. And as I've shown you guys recently, the Russians are also pushing up this road towards Velika Novosilka. So again, another highway that is being captured for Russian use in the future. Logistically speaking, the south was one of the worst areas for the Russians. But with the capture of the E50 here out of Donetsk and almost the entire capture of the 0532 down to Ugledar, the Russians are going to have just much simpler logistics in this little half circle right here. So basically from Velika Novosilka down to Ugledar, up to Marinka, into Donetsk, and then up here into, Novohordivka or Hordivka towards Pokrovsk, basically. The Russians now will soon have this entire logistics line here undone, which will mean that just the ease of logistics is going to greatly increase the speed of Russian advances and their ability to move reserves around very quickly, get supplies where it needs to go. Everything becomes easier once the Russians capture this 0532. Okay, so north of Vadyan, north of Ugledar, the Russians have pushed out past the 0532 and have captured just this series of fields. This is actually quite important because now the Russians will likely be able to assault Katarinivka from the south, as well as pushing in from Constantinivka. But if you guys know how the defenses in the south work, they are meant to the fortifications are actually these little towns, right? They're just a string of them. So these fortifications kind of defend from a southern push, not so much an eastern push. So the Russians will be able to push in, but pushing down this line straight is kind of a death sentence. I mean, just pushing along a road, you have one road that you're pushing in from, makes it very difficult. Now with this advance, this pocket should close and the Russians will be able to start advancing on Katarinivka. And what that allows is logistics to start running along the 0532. That'll push the Ukrainians back enough that logistics can really start running along this road, and Ugledar will fall probably within this month. I don't know how much longer the Ukrainians can hold out. Honestly, I didn't expect them to make it to this point in this region. They shouldn't be there, but the concern I think that the Ukrainians have is that upon losing Ugledar, there's just nothing to fall back on. Like this is not going to provide any defense. It's flat. It's nothing. It has one road connecting it. That's sort of the story of this entire area. And that just continues back into this entire area, all the way back to the Dnieper River, right? So I think Ugledar is a must hold for the Ukrainians. And I think they are in the process of losing it right now. And that's going to be very hard for them to recover from, especially considering the mountain of issues that they're dealing with across other sections of the front. All right. Just north of Konstantinivka and just south of Pebeta, the Russians have advanced along the 0532 and have captured this section of the road. Excuse me. Just again, securing this line of logistics, vitally important. And the assaults down here, by the way, let me just mention this: the assaults of the Russians in this direction have been impeccable. Compared to the memes that you come to mind when you think of Ugledar and previous Russian assaults, this has been completely different. We've seen almost no like mass casualty events, no minefield events, nothing of the sort. They seem to be when they do assault, it seems to be successful, and they're taking highly valuable positions from the Ukrainians. Really, what I think this has to do with is the fact that the Ukrainians are not actively mining anymore. And they are no longer mining to any great extent. Like there's no huge minefields being laid, and also the Ukrainian artillery situation is so poor, and the drone situation is so poor that the Russians can now move around without getting picked off if they leave cover at any given time. So the fighting down here is been very, very proficient by the Russians. And it's going to yield a massive result here very soon. And this was sort of the idea behind what I expected the Russians to do this summer. I believe that the summer idea was sort of delayed by the Kharkov offensive, and then the Kursk incursion also has just slowed down the overall push, but it's still going in the exact direction I thought, and it's not going to stop as we get into the muddy season. The Russians are just going to keep up the pressure. Okay. Everybody doing good in chat? Come back and check on you guys. So did Ukraine run out of mines, or are the artillery pushback defective? Yeah, no. So all of the minefields that Ukraine was enjoying were predominantly established before the war and laid up into the war. So these minefields had been around. They're not out of mines. But the ability to set up massive minefields, it's dangerous work. It takes time, and you're exposed while you're doing it. So the Ukrainians are not out in front of Ugledar planting landmines, right? They can't do that. There are still sporadic mines. They still mine roads. You're still going to see Russian armored vehicles hit mines. This is not something that's going to go away. But the overall mining situation has decreased significantly. The massive minefields don't seem to exist anymore past the initial strong defensive fortifications that the Ukrainians were enjoying. Also, just the artillery situation, artillery, SPGs, like self-propelled guns, and towed artillery pieces are also becoming endangered. And so certain areas of the front, like Ugledar, like Seversk, and some of these less important areas of the front, Kherson, Zaporozhye, are all getting their artillery pulled away and sent to the east or Kursk to keep these operations afloat. So ease of operations for the Russians in these less active areas of the front is increasing dramatically. I hope that answered your question. All right, back to the map. Russian forces have advanced and captured the small Ugledar-esque town of Horstry here. This town, I always say Ugledar just because it's a little square, just kind of like Ugledar, same size, but not the same defensive fortification that Ugledar is by any means. They've captured that small town and closed some of this salient here just north of Maximilivkivka. Okay. Now moving up to the Pokrovsk front. So this entire front right here is what we consider the Pokrovsk front. It used to be the Avdiivka front. Zooming in here, the Russians have captured Zelene Pershe, which is a significant advance because the Ukrainians were definitely trying to hold it. The next objective for the Russians should be this fortification. If you guys remember, I was confused about where the Ukrainians were encircled. They were encircled up in this region and in this fortification here, not down here. So This pocket has closed. I don't know what happened to the Ukrainians that were in that pocket. They said they had a ton of wounded. I never heard if they broke out. I never heard if they were eliminated. That pocket just sort of closed. So take it as you will. I'll let your imaginations fill in what might or might not have happened there. But yeah, okay. So moving over here, all of Ukrainsk has been captured. This is vital. This is super, super significant to both the Russian offensive and the Ukrainian defense. You can see that this town was protected sort of by a line of defense. The Ukrainian line of defense that started up here near Orlivka and Sakivka, Vesele, Ivanovka, ran all the way down. It has been completely captured. Guys, this was the last line of Ukrainian defense. There's a few small lines up here. Most of these have been captured already as well. And then there's this one right outside of Hordivka. But this is it. I mean, you can see back here, guys, there's nothing in this area. And not just that I haven't mapped it. There's just nothing back here. The only thing you'll see is a few fortifications in some of these settlements that run along, east to west, but that's for defense from the south. So the Russians are now basically officially through all of the Ukrainian fortifications that were established to prevent the Donetsk region from collapsing. So now you're on the backside of it, and we can expect the Russians to push down into these settlements, thereby nullifying this entire Ukrainian defense line, which will then put a ton of pressure on Kharkov. Once Kharkov falls, this entire southern flank just collapses because there's no supply and logistics to any of this area. So the overall situation for the Ukrainians is deteriorating at an incredible pace now. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And just from a topography standpoint, I'm going to take us over to the map. I love my maps. Map, topography map. Let's get it. Boom. Come down here. Horchitny, Hordivka, Ukrainsk. You can see how important Ukrainsk is in this area. The Russians now control the dominant tactical high ground in the entire region. It looks down on all of these towns. It looks down on these towns. So the Russians are now in control of the general area with the capture of that Terekon or industrial spoil, industrial waste heap. Basically the excess from mining operations. The Russians now control it. And this is going to be the next bloom for the Russians. I'm going to take us back over to the other map so you guys can actually see the names of the towns that are going to get captured. But Novoselidivka, Tuskerny, Kremena, Balka, all these towns right here are now going to be pushed very hard. The Ukrainians do not have strong defensive lines back here. These villages, these towns are small and do not offer great defense. And it does look like there's some sort of canal here, which will probably not benefit the Ukrainians that are in this pocket right here. So sort of what we're looking at kind of is this area is about to become untenable for the Ukrainians. You can see the canal here. They're going to try to hold it, but it's just really not set up very well. It's pretty much bordered by the Vovocha River and the reservoir around Kharkov. This entire area right here, guys, this is what you're looking at as the pocket that is now being exposed because of the fall of Ukrainsk. There's a reason why the Ukrainians were throwing everything that they could to hold it. They fought for it for a couple of weeks, which was actually very impressive with the speed that this Russian offensive was moving. But it has now fallen, and you can see the consequences are going to be dire for the Ukrainians. This canal is not going to offer. Is it a canal or is it a rail line? Oh, it's a rail line. It's a rail line. Still, though, this rail line is going to offer a geographical boundary. I thought it was a canal coming out of this reservoir, but it's actually a rail line. And this reservoir, the Vovocha River reservoir thing down here, is not going to help aid the Ukrainians in logistics across it. maintaining its presence in this area. So again, like the Novelske pocket, we could see another massive collapse here, which will then lead to another massive collapse down here. We could be, I'm telling you guys, by October, November, we could see Korchove fall, Ugledar fall, and that entire, basically, all of this entire area could fall by October, November time period, just with how the Russians are moving and the objectives that the Russians are achieving. Everything has consequences on the battlefield. Every single movement has consequences. So, yep. All right. Moving out of Pokrovsk, up to, nope, still in Pokrovsk section. The Russians have advanced across the Zuravka River here in Hordivka and have established themselves in the western end of the city, again approaching this final line of defense before the Battle of Minhorod and Pokrovsk begin earnestly. All right, moving up to the New York Toretsk salient. Remember, guys, I had talked about this specifically and the specific importance of this exact area. And I told you that the Russians were going to try to push here because reaching these Terrakons from the backside is going to make Toretsk a nightmare for the Ukrainians. If the Russians can secure this southern, basically subdivision, I don't know, it's almost a separate town. If they're able to capture this, it's going to give them a great launching off point for attacks into the Toretsk industrial zone. And as you can see, the Russians have advanced greatly out of the penal colony, which happened about a week and a half ago, maybe less, maybe a week ago, and then have advanced up to the gas station and then further up into the center of Toretsk. Oops, my bad. Moving up into the center of Toretsk. And once they breach into these buildings and this industrial zone, the battle for Toretsk is basically over. You should see this salient, this forested area, this Terrakon right here, fall within the next couple of days. As you know, you can see Ukrainian logistics into this area is going to be next to impossible. Most of this is the likely gray zone already. And then we should see the battle for this southern section of the town. It does have a good number of high-rise buildings, apartment buildings that will be useful for Ukrainian defense. But just the overall situation in this salient is becoming worse and worse. And by the salient, I mean from Pokrovsk front to Chasiv Yar front, the situation in this salient is becoming worse and worse. And I'm going to explain why here in just a second. Okay, moving up to the Kleshchevka area. We have now geolocated footage of Russian forces in this forested area right out here. So the Russians have crossed the canal just outside of Kleshchevka towards Stupochke. And if you guys remember, this was exactly what I had talked about. The Russians are moving exactly how I suspected that they would, crossing into Stupochke onto the high ground. Once Stupochke is secured, then they will begin operations down to cut this highway into Toretsk. Big moves by the Russians. Crossing that physical barrier is a very big deal, and it's going to be difficult for the Ukrainians to hold Chasiv Yar now. With the developments that we've seen up in the north here, which we will talk about again here in a second, Chasiv Yar is now entering into a tactical encirclement as well. It does have a lot of supply roads through the back, so it's not going to be cut off from supply. But we can see that the major arteries that lead into the town are being cut off, specifically the 0504 here, which is going to deliver most of the supplies through Constantinivka up through these roads into Chasiv Yar. All right, to the north of Chasiv Yar in Kalinina, just north of Kalinina, the Russians have closed this gap on this side of the canal here. There was a strong Ukrainian fortification in this region. It has fallen, and we should expect the continuation of the fall of this side of the canal for the Russians, and then the continuation of assaults north by the Russians, backdooring Seversk and Slavyansk again. I will take us over to the topographical map. I like to do this because it gives you guys a greater understanding of the overall situation. Izum, Slaviansk, Torsk, Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar. Okay, so here we go. You can see that the Russians have advanced and captured Hirhodivka up here and captured this area. So this high ground now is completely captured by the Russians, and they should continue along this canal, which is based on the high ground. And as you can see, the canal is the perfect area to continue pushing out. Just push along the high ground, backdooring Seversk, Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka. All of these places are now on the low ground with the Russians on the high ground along this ridge. That is the goal of the Russians. Let's see. Can you please guess what was the message that forced Biden to cool his head, allowing Z to hit? I think that they just made it very clear that there was going to be a direct response to the West, maybe asymmetrical. I'm not sure, but I think that they basically laid down the law saying, if you do this, you are now an active participant in the conflict. And then, you know, the U.S. doesn't want to get it doesn't want to put its own skin in the game. So the second that the Russians actually make tangible threats, the United States listens. That doesn't mean we're not going to see the green light given eventually. It just means for now, the Russian threats have outplayed the Western delusion of a Ukrainian victory or whatever, doing more damage to Russia. Okay, moving up from Chasiv Yar, we have just a small little advance on the northern end of the Seversky Donetsk River here through the forest. It is important, but not significant. Now moving up to the the Nevsky area, Nevsky area. The Russians have advanced pretty significantly through the Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast, mostly just the Luhansk Oblast, it looks like, and are approaching the Zhybyets River from the east, putting a lot of pressure on the Ukrainian garrison in Novelske and in the towns all along this side of the Zhybyets River. This is going to be the first achievement of the Russians in the Oskol River Basin region, is pushing the Ukrainians beyond the Zhybyets River and flattening out the line along the river. It's going to alleviate a lot of pressure that the Russians have been feeling on Kremenna, and then it should allow for the beginning of operations into Toretsk or Torsk, Zarishny, and then into Liman. All right, moving up to the Pasani area. The Russians have made another significant advance, roughly 10 square kilometers captured, and again, are putting a lot of pressure on this Oskol River region, putting a lot of pressure on the town of Kolsanivka and Hushkivka. So again, we talked about this. The Russians control the high ground here now. This area is becoming a pit for Ukrainian reinforcements. Trying to hold the positions here is difficult. And trying to hold the positions in the north pocket here is also becoming much, much more difficult for the Ukrainians rather. We've seen Petropavlivka get hammered with FABs recently. This is the main artery into this entire region. Again, we could be looking at another collapse here. It's just going to happen when nobody expecting it. We've seen very little movement, from the actual Sinkivka area down. But I do think that this pocket, one day, you're just going to see a massive Russian advance into this area, and it's going to just wrap up this entire escapade for the Ukrainians and push them behind the Oskol. Okay. Last but not least, certainly not least, the Russian forces have advanced in the Kursk region. Again, this is the previous advance, is the orange. The new advance is the yellow. They have basically pushed out along the... So I got yelled at by some people because the river is the Senahist River in Ukraine, But then when you get up here into Russia, I think it changes to, I know that there's the Sagnost River too, somewhere around here. Yeah, Sagnost, Reke Sagnost. So I think the same river has two different spellings depending on what side of the border you're on. Senhist, yeah. So the front has leveled out along that river, and it just, the Ukrainians just do not have the forces capable of defending this salient. We talked about this for months, for a month now. I said the entire time, you look at the space that they're holding, it doesn't have established fortifications. It doesn't have major cities. It doesn't have major objectives. It's just open emptiness, and that's hard to maintain, especially when you don't have the forces to just lob at it endlessly. And we're beginning to see a serious reduction in the overall size, but the Ukrainians are not done fighting here. They continue to try to penetrate down, over here. Remember, this was the river that had been cut off. Pontoon bridges and established bridges had been destroyed in this area. The Ukrainians were trying to cut this entire section of the front off. As you can see, this area is gray zone over here, cut off by a river. Again, the Ukrainians destroyed the bridges, but they were never able to actually put serious pressure here. And with this Russian advance, it has completely opened up this area to receive logistics through the north. So the pressure that's being applied here is too little, too late. The Ukrainians are, the pro-Ukrainian information space is coping significantly, saying that the front looks like something like this down here, kind of something like that. But that's just ridiculous. The attacks basically came across the border. They pushed in about 1 kilometer and were destroyed. So no, that's not what's happening. What is happening is that the Ukrainians are being forced out, and the situation is getting very, 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 very close to being dire for the AFU. Because one of the main roads in the region that's supplying this entire northern area is about to be cut by the Russians. And it gets even worse if the Russians make an advance of, let's see, 15 kilometers, something like that. And remember, this is open field, so that can happen very quick. This advance happened very quick. They will cut off the supply on the R200 highway into Zdruzhda. So the entire salient is now in a precarious situation, and it's going to be a major loss for the Ukrainian armed forces when they lose it and they have nothing to show for it. Yeah. Okay. If you guys have questions, go ahead and get some questions on. That is all my map updates for today. I have just a couple articles that I wanted to talk about here, and then we will move on to the sort of Q&A portion. All right, so sort of what I've been talking about for a long time. Opinion, this is on the Washington Post. Ukraine is bleeding out. It cannot fight forever. I'm going to go ahead and save you guys the intro here. Basically, he's talking about a wounded or a hospital, therapy hospital for soldiers after they've had their arms and legs blown off, and he's talking about how it's really bad for Ukraine. It's looking really bad. But here's where it starts to get interesting. Listening to their stories, you realize that Ukraine is bleeding out. Its will to fight is as strong as ever, but its army is exhausted by a ceaseless drone war that's unlike anything in the history of combat. The Biden administration's rubric of support, quote, as long as it takes, the stupidest thing ever said by a sitting U.S. president, simply doesn't match the reality of this conflict. Ukraine doesn't have enough soldiers to fight an indefinite war of attrition. It needs to escalate to be strong enough to reach a decent settlement. Wholly delusional. So instead of, they're so close. They're so close to understanding it. They're this close to being there, right? Instead of Ukraine needs to negotiate because it's fighting a fruitless, pointless war that they can't win. No, what they need to do is escalate so that they can win better. Oh my God. We're just surrounded by the stupidest people ever, and they get lifted into these positions where they have a voice and they're allowed to talk. It's a joke, man. It's horrible. Here we go. That's the lessons I took from the visit here to attend a conference sponsored by Pinchuk's group, YES, which stands for Yalta European Strategy. It was founded 20 years ago to encourage Ukraine's integration with the West, so just a fucking NGO. Now it's trying to prevent the country's destruction. No, it's trying to accelerate it by allowing them to strike Russia with Western weapons. The title of the meeting was The Necessity to Win, but the underlying message was that without more firepower, Ukraine might be forced to settle on Vladimir Putin's terms to halt his brutal onslaught. God damn, dude. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard that these people get paid so much more money than me to write these goddamn articles, dude. A monkey with a typewriter could have put out this piece of garbage. It's just the same repetitive doubling down on failure nonsense that this is the least pro-Ukrainian article I have ever read in my entire life. They're acknowledging the problems, and then their solution is to exacerbate the problem. Miserable. I am so sorry to the Ukrainian population, the Ukrainian nation, that the West gave you the idea that you were going to be able to win this war, and then foolishly you believed us after we've lied countless times in the past to our proxies, and you went along with it, and now you're getting exactly what everybody told you you were going to get. Frustrating. So frustrating. They're so close. But it's something with the ideological aspect of their thinking where if they just can't switch the narrative until, well, just wait, because as soon as Kamala switches the narrative, or as soon as the Democrats or whoever gets into office switches the narrative, all those NPC brains are going to switch, and Ukraine's not going to matter anymore. And it's going to be the saddest thing any of us have ever seen. All right. Ukraine may have a new strategy in Russia's Kursk Oblast. This is from Forbes. Move fast and surround thousands of Russian troops. This is not satire. This is a real article that's being put out. Surround thousands of Russian troops. Oh, why didn't we think of that? God, man. Sorry about this ad. It's huge. It shocked many observers, apparently including many Russians, when on Thursday, Ukrainian sappers writing... is this super old? No. What? Russian village of Novy Put. Oh. Breached Russian defenses. Oh, so this didn't happen. I thought they were talking about the beginning of the operation. This did not happen. Cool. The village is 20 miles from the main Ukrainian salient in Russia's Kursk Oblast 6 weeks ago. If it wasn't unclear last week why the Ukrainians would also invade around Novy Put, it's a bit clearer now. Backed by tanks and covered by Ukrainian Air Force warplanes. No, they were not. Lobbing building demolishing glide bombs. No, they weren't. I saw one building get hit by a glide bomb. A Ukrainian tactical group, apparently anchored by the 95th Air Assault Brigade is slicing right as it advances past Novy Put and through the southern blocks of the Russian town of Vesole. So, by the way, guys, this is what I was talking about. This is the fake Ukrainian cope, which I don't know where it's coming from, but they said that basically they penetrated here and made it up to this town, which is 2 miles across the border, 5 kilometers. I don't know what that 20-kilometer nonsense is, but they didn't breach that far. They actually breached here, went up this road a little bit, got hammered, retreated. They did another one over here. Same thing happened. So this is what I was talking about. There's this weird cope going on where there's just a phantom battle happening, apparently, in Kursk region, and nobody knows, and nobody can actually point to any geolocations or anything like that, but it is happening, and thousands of Russian troops are being surrounded. So just more nonsense. That's just that article I thought was kind of funny. I wanted to read it for more of humor's sake than actual takeaways. I think Israel is going to launch a military operation in Lebanon. We will talk about this in just a second. Novi Put means new path. Yeah, it's just one of the names of the Russian border towns. But yeah, here we go. Let's go over here and let's go to the last one. So if you guys didn't know, there was another attempted assassination. It wasn't very close to an attempted assassination. He just was going there to attempt to assassinate Trump, I guess. But this crazy loon, likely a candidate for NAFO, was the orchestrator of this brilliant plan. He basically charged at Trump on a golf course with an SKS. But if we look here, we can see that. So that's helping Ukraine worry Trump's assassination attempt suspect will hurt their cause. Well, yes, because he was an avid pro-Ukrainian, and it makes most of you guys look absolutely delusional. So this individual was an avid pro-Ukrainian supporter. He was attempting to, there's video of him. He's done interviews with different news outlets because he's been one of these vocal pro-Ukraine crazies, basically, like literally the definition of a NAFO boomer, nothing going on in their life, and they dedicate their entire life to this narrative and this ideology. The pro-Ukraine group, I guess you would call it. Also, she looks like she is just starstruck by him, which is a crazy statement. But he was actively trying to recruit for the Ukrainian International Legion at different times. Everybody's distanced themselves from him, of course. Crazy person. But yeah, it's not a good look, right? This is the group of people that I interact with online. It's this human being on the other side of a Twitter account saying that I'm a Russian propagandist with 2 Z's in there. That's this individual, and then they're absolute lunatics who go and try to assassinate a sitting president in a horrible fashion too. How does that dork get on a building with a ladder and take a couple shots at the president, and your idea was you're going to just run at him on a golf course? Awesome. Good choices. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the recent events in the Middle East. So today, an event happened, a pretty wild event to say the least. A large number of Hezbollah fighters in the southern Lebanon region were all received a pager message. They use pagers better than cell phones, I guess, for not being tracked and struck by Israeli strikes, so on and so forth. Anyway, these pagers all received a message at the same time. The message caused a detonation of the pagers. I do not know if there was plastic explosives placed in the pagers somehow, or if it was something to do with the battery. You can overheat these things, but they didn't necessarily look like batteries burning, you know how batteries burn. They're bright and they're hot and they stick to things, but it's not an explosion usually. This was a series of explosions all around Lebanon. Thousands of people were injured. It was not small explosions either. This was basically taking off people's hands, putting holes in dressers. People had them sitting on their dressers, put holes in dressers. They were very powerful explosions. A 10-year-old girl died. Multiple civilians that were unrelated were injured or killed. So this was a definite escalation. All fingers are pointing to the IDF. The U.S. came out and said that they had no idea that this was going on. Bullshit. I don't believe that for a second. And this is working for Israel's goal. Israel is trying everything in their power, or Netanyahu is at least, to start a regional war against Iran. They want the U.S. to help them. I do feel like they think that their time is now, and I don't blame them. I think that if they continue to not destroy their enemies around them, they will eventually be beaten. And I think that is the realistic situation that they're looking at. They can see that the West is weakening. Now is their last opportunity to deal with this Iranian issue before it becomes too big. Before they get a nuke, that would be a really bad situation for Israel, right? So they're trying to make something happen now. Another aspect of this is that Netanyahu is basically facing prison time if he is removed from office. And a way that he prevents being removed from office is by the continuation of this war, the continuation of martial law, and eventually the suspension of elections, right? The same thing Zelensky's doing right now. Both of these regimes are doing everything in their power to survive. They're extremely dangerous right now. And this attack that we saw is probably going to be the catalyst for the escalation into a regional war. I think Hezbollah and Iran have been very passive towards actually responding aggressively towards Iran, because it's what Iran wants, right? Whether you think it's a good idea or not, whether you think it's embarrassing or they look weak or whatever, Israel wants a war. Iran, Hezbollah don't want a war. That's not how Hezbollah wins right now. Hezbollah wins by continuing to grow in strength while Israel continues to weaken and the US's hegemony continues to weaken in the region. That's the best way going forward for them. Will they be able to do that now after this event? I don't think so. But I also didn't think they were going to be able to give such a, what I would consider a weak response to the strike on that killed one of their leaders. Actually, the response from Hezbollah was not weak. They actually struck some pretty sensitive targets and did some damage, but the Israeli propaganda machine just silenced all of that and said basically that nothing had happened. It was a great victory for Israel. And then both sides kind of went back to doing their normal thing. I think that has changed. I think that we are now going to see at least a war between Hezbollah and Israel in southern Lebanon, a war that I do believe Israel will lose. All right. Israel doesn't like to inform the U.S. about its ops, and I don't think the U.S. wants to be informed. I think the U.S. is fine with whatever Israel does because they have plausible deniability. They can just say it's Israel's fault. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to go to war with Israel? You're going to catch a nuke? Like, it's the perfect situation that they have for themselves. So, yeah. All right. If you guys have some questions, I am all done with everything that I had to present today. I'm going to exit out of my tabs, and we can just do a little bit of chatting for a little bit. How can Israel lose? The same way they lost in 2006, Bubba. The exact same way they lost in 2006. They go in. They do not have the population, the economy, the military endurance to undertake an operation like this. They're already so depleted from the year of war in Gaza. By the way, they couldn't deal with Hamas in Gaza without completely leveling the entire place, which they're still in the process of doing, and they are still taking losses in that region. They have now shifted everything to the northern front. Hamas is going to reestablish themselves in Gaza. It's going to become another issue because the Israelis are leaving, and the north is going to become a hotbed of action. The Hezbollah is going to go about it the same way that everybody expects them to. They're going to launch a series of ballistic missiles at very, very sensitive infrastructure targets in northern and central Israel. And the Hezbollah's goal should be just to depopulate Israel by destroying all of the civilian infrastructure. That's how you win, because Israel cannot afford an extended long war in southern Lebanon. What's going to happen is Hezbollah is going to take major losses. Beirut is probably going to be completely destroyed. A lot of these other places in Lebanon are going to be completely destroyed. But at this point, I mean, Israel is striking Lebanon whenever they please. We're already at war. It just hasn't escalated to the point where everybody's going to convince themselves that they are at war, right? So, yeah, I think that's why that's how Israel is not in a position right now to take this fight in southern Lebanon. They couldn't do it in 2006 when Hezbollah was much weaker. Now Hezbollah is much stronger, and nothing has improved for Israel over the last year. And the domestic situation is so unstable. The political situation is so unstable. Half of the Israeli government doesn't want to go into southern Lebanon because they know exactly what is going to happen. And the other half is the current regime that wants to stay in power. So that just like Ukraine is smoldering from within, Israel is also smoldering from within. And the only thing keeping them going right now is the prospect of a larger regional war. That's the situation. If the war ends, just like if the war ends in Ukraine, the political consequences on the current regime are going to be so significant that they won't be able to survive. Like Zelensky is never getting reelected. Netanyahu is never getting reelected. Scott, do you ever get the feeling that this war will never see its end? I mean, don't you think the called deep state won't ever let Russia? Well, I mean, they can't keep fighting forever. Ukraine doesn't have the economy or the population. They are a proxy that's on the edge of collapse. So unless you're going to get a NATO country involved, which I don't see happening, they won't even cross the line of letting Ukraine use Western weapon systems on Russian territory because of the implications. Yeah, I don't see Poland getting involved. I don't see any of that happening. So no, I think that this war will have a definite end. And I think the U.S. is going to memory hole it, just like they did Afghanistan, just like they did everything else. Do you think Ukraine's front line will collapse and Russia will take massive amounts of ground? Yeah, as soon as the attrition has set in to the point where the Russians feel like they can move freely. We're already seeing strike UAVs conducting operations over the Kursk and Sumy regions, which would suggest that Ukrainian air defense is completely degraded. It's the first time we've seen the Russians using them throughout the war. That's just going to continue to amplify Ukrainian losses. And yeah, it's just this snowball effect. I don't know when that line is going to collapse. They're holding on for now, but it's getting worse daily. So thank you for your question. Who has more casualties between Ukraine and Russia? Ukraine. Ukraine, without a doubt, has more casualties than Russia. Russia has been utilizing and exercising a massive firepower advantage in Ukraine since day one. Ukraine has not been able to strike Russia with missiles. Ukraine does not have a 10-1 in some areas artillery shell advantage. There's no advantage Ukraine has on the battlefield besides at certain specific points. Maybe they had advantages in drones and stuff like that, but not for the last basically year and a half. The Russians have had an advantage in all of these fields. There is no way mathematically Ukrainian losses are less than Russian losses. That's just nonsense. Russia recently stated for the first time that one of the drones was launched from Finland, although there had been similar cases before. So what if this continues? I don't know. I don't even know what they're supposed to do about it. Defeat the enemy that you're fighting in Ukraine is the only way that I can see going about stopping that. So, yeah. What do you think Russia's most optimal strategy should be to finally take the eastern bank of the Oskal River? Just what they're doing right now. I mean, just slowly pushing, and you don't want to take the territory if you don't need to. That Oskal River region, that is not good for the Ukrainians. Crossing rivers for logistics is exactly what the Russians prevented in Kherson, right? You don't want to put yourself in that position. The Ukrainians have been sitting in this position for months and months and years. The pontoon bridges get hit, the crossings get hit constantly. Yeah, it's not a good place. It's not a solid defensive line. The Ukrainians could just back up over the Oskal and reduce their casualties on that front and have a stable front line and be able to push reserves elsewhere. But the embarrassment from that is too great. It's the PR traps that the Ukrainians find themselves in. So the best way that the Russians can go about it is just continue attriting Ukrainian forces in a very non-advantageous position for them. That's how I would go about it. How fast do you think cities and villages will fall that are located behind Pokrovsk once Pokrovsk is fully under Russian control? I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I think you'll see that the Ukrainians will have to take massive steps back. So I believe that the Russians will be walking into most of these smaller settlements. Are countries counting on us to supply them? Are the countries counting on us to supply them, even fight for them, aware of just how close we are to a complete breakdown. 2 attempted assassinations is not a sign of a functional state. I think that the biggest issue, the bigger issue of that is not so much the collapse that we're in. It's our military industrial capacity output is so piss poor and so expensive that that should be the issue that they're worried about. Israel should be very concerned that if something kicks off and the U.S.'s focus is pulled somewhere else, same with Ukraine, but Ukraine is already experiencing this, they are going to be the first ones that get cut off from supplies if the U.S. gets into something that it needs, its full attention on. So yeah, I think that they should be very concerned. How numerous is what might be called the core of the Ukrainian military now, meaning seasoned, well-trained? I would say less than 100,000 men that have like significant combat experience and could potentially teach new recruits stuff on the front line. Not the basic stuff, but the serious stuff. I'd say probably 100,000 remaining not original fighters, but well-seasoned, well-trained fighters. Ukraine has lost 700,000 men. Russia has lost 40,000. Probably not. I think that Ukrainian number is probably exaggerated and that Russian number is underestimated. I would say probably closer to 100,000 Russians have been lost and probably close to 500,000 Ukrainians have been lost. If Trump gets elected, will Ukraine end? No. Remember, guys, there's a permanent deep state. There's a permanent establishment in Washington that never leaves. It's never changing. You have the illusion of choice when it comes to your voting. Your vote does not matter. It's just the illusion of which party you want to pretend is making decisions, but neither party is making decisions because there's a uniparty and they all have the exact same foreign policy. What are the ultimate strategic targets for Russia? Basically, NATO neutrality for Ukraine. If Ukraine agreed to NATO neutrality right now, I bet the war would end. The U.S. Pentagon, as well as Zelensky in his last CNN interview, said that Russia has pulled all important assets back beyond ATACMS and Storm Shadow range. So why does Ukraine? Because it's the narrative that they have. They want to beg. It's easier to blame other people for your failures and blame specific reasons for your failures instead of the fact that you're just failing because that's the situation you're in. Oh, it's the West's fault that they won't let us destroy the Archer and just the Arrow, whatever nonsense. It's just a way to complain. Is it possible for Russia to bypass Chasiv Yar to reach Constantinivka? Yeah, no, they don't even have to go through Chasiv Yar. You're already seeing it. They can reach Constantinivka just by pushing down on the 05, 04 here through Stepochki. So they can just completely bypass Chasiv Yar and get into the Konstantinivka area and back behind Toretsk. How many missiles do they expect to get? Is it going to be hardly anything anyway? Yeah, I mean, no more than 100, 200 of any missile system. That's what the U.S. had on their long-term plan. I think they gave a total of 200 ATACMS to Ukraine. This is what I'm saying, guys. They just don't have any means to change the situation on the battlefield. So that whole article we read about Ukraine being hamstrung by the West is just a complete joke. The only thing that the West is doing is preventing Ukraine from being completely destroyed through that action. Recently, History Legends made a video when he said Ukrainians living in Europe are unwilling to fight for Ukraine. Is it correct? If so, why is it also, let's say, Ukrainian people's term control to join the AFU en masse? Will it help? So yeah, no, there's nobody in Europe who wants to fight for Ukraine. Nobody gives a shit about Ukraine. Nobody in America gives a shit. Nobody in Europe gives a shit. The only people who care about Ukrainians are Ukrainians and maybe some Russians, honestly, to be quite honest. That's the two groups. So no, no Europeans are not willing to fight for Ukraine. There are probably some Europeans who are willing to fight against Russia, but not for Ukraine. That's not for Ukraine, or not because of Ukraine, not on Ukrainian territory. That would be extremely unpopular in any European or United States country, right? In the United States. And when you're talking about Ukrainian people joining en masse, they've already joined. Everybody who wants to volunteer has already volunteered. This has been going on for 2.5 years. There's nobody walking down to the recruitment center right now and saying, "Hey, sign me up. Now is when I want to join." No, they've already gone through all those people. They've already gone through the patriots. They've already gone through all the sociopaths who want to go fight and kill Russians. All those people have been sent. All those people have died. Now the people they're sending are the people that they're throwing into vans. Those are not the people that want to fight. And there's this argument that they can recruit that, or they can mobilize the 18 to 25-year-olds. No, they can't, and no, it won't make a difference. That is the smallest group of Ukrainian population. It is the most vital group of Ukrainian population that has not had kids, but needs to. And they don't want to fight. They don't want to fight. So it's just not going to happen. Thank you for your question, though, man. I appreciate that. All right. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. That takes us to an hour. Man, I always hit these things right on an hour. I wasn't even looking at the time. I really appreciate you all. Just some news coming out here for everybody who made it to the end. I will be starting my daily series of map updates. I will still be doing my live stream. The map will be updated. The green will turn to red after my live streams, but I will be doing daily short map updates. So if you don't have time to catch my full live stream, you will be able to catch up on the daily map updates. Those will be posted probably at the end of each day, like 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So be on the lookout for those. I am looking forward to doing that series. Those videos are going to be like 5 to 10 minutes, probably nothing major, but be on the lookout for those, guys. I really appreciate you so much. Be sure, if you have not gone and signed up for that Patreon, go sign up for that Patreon. It is free. If you wish it to be free, if you wish to support me, you can also support me. I want all my content to be available to you guys, so go check that out there. Thank you guys so much for all of your support, and thank you for watching my live stream today. Take care, be safe, and I will see you on the next one, guys. Goodbye.